We already have austerity, it's just in the private sector. They seem to want greater government interventionism. And the question really is why politicians won't learn those lessons. I'm Annabel Denham, and I will be responding to some of the excellent reader responses to my latest article, in which I argue that Britain's fiscal reckoning is finally here. We begin with a comment from Matt who says, "It is clear that we need to cut the public purse. The problem is that Labour absolutely castigated the Tories after the financial crash, using the word austerity. Labour are now hamstrung as any cut is considered to be austerity." I would make 2 points. The first is that actually we already have austerity. It's just in the private sector rather than in the public sector. Look at what has happened to the tax burden in recent years and how it's now set to reach a post-war high by the end of this decade. And I would just make a second point, which is, let's not forget that even in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, not a single chancellor presented a fiscal surplus. Not a single chancellor has balanced the books since 2001. The problem is that Labour has managed to present to the public austerity as a social evil. And this is partly as a result of the way in which the Tories approached cutting government spending in 2010, 2011 and the years that followed, which was to salami slice departmental budgets, chronically underfund areas of public spending that most of us would consider to be very important. But actually, we should be welcoming any attempt by any government to impose more efficiency and ultimately trim the state, because that's the only way that we're going to get out of the mess we're in. We now have a comment from Beverly who says, "In 1960s Hong Kong, taxes were slashed and the economy boomed. The UK's economy is being taxed to a standstill. Politicians of all stripes should reflect on what Sir John Cupthwaite, the British civil servant, did to make Hong Kong so prosperous in the aftermath of the Second World War, which was largely to get government out of the way. That he looked at what was happening on the mainland and how it was pursuing nationalisations and controls and high taxes and rejected that approach. They wanted to allow entrepreneurs to invest and to manage their own businesses. They wanted to keep the books balanced, and they thought that low taxes was the way to encourage private investment, and that was what would expand the long-term tax base. And the economic results were astonishing. And indeed, we've seen this happen across the world throughout history in different periods, time and again. And the question really is why politicians won't learn those lessons and why it is they're always drawn into expanding the state and funding that through higher taxes. Remo Williams says, "To be fair, Reeves did try to pass a bill to cut welfare, but both Labour and the Tories voted it down." That's right, but of course a lot of Labour MPs also voted it down. We saw that massive backbench rebellion which the Chancellor had to capitulate to. But I can't fathom for the life of me why the Conservative Party decided to prioritise political point scoring over saving the taxpayer money. Really what Kemi Badenoch should have done was support the government in its efforts to cut £5 billion from the welfare bill, even if that overall bill was set to go up by around £20 billion by the end of this Parliament. And as for reform, well, their economic agenda, the more and more we seem to hear about it and learn about it, seems to be far to the left of what I expected. They seem to want higher spending on welfare, on the NHS. They seem to want greater government interventionism in the economy, having only recently called for part nationalising utilities, which means that there should be an opportunity for the Conservative Party to make their USP being the party that will lower taxes and ultimately shrink the size of the state. We've now got a comment from Wilfred Francis who says, "It is a myth that the rich pay a lot of taxes in this country. They don't. Well, I would say that the data tell quite a different story, that top 1% pay around 29% of all income tax, that the top 0.1% of earners in the UK, those with pre-tax incomes above £890,000, are producing just under 6% of all income generated, and yet they're paying around 13% of all income tax. But let's say that they are undertaxed and they ought to be paying more. I would just ask, through what mechanism? Because wealth taxes, for instance, have been a failure almost everywhere they've been tried and subsequently reversed, as the cost of administration outweighs the amount that is brought into the exchequer. We know that millionaires are already fleeing Labour Britain in their droves, that the super rich are very sensitive to tax increases. So I think as a society we need to ask ourselves whether we'd really be comfortable imposing measures designed to harm the rich, even if they worsen the lot of the poor. That's it for this week. As always, thank you to everyone who took the time to share their thoughts in the comments. Please do keep them coming, and we'll try to respond to as many of you as we can.